Welcome. Real Estate Chicago style podcast. I'm your host, Joe Smazel. I'm a broker and partner at Terra Realty. We're a boutique real estate brokerage in Chicago, focused on selling apartment buildings in Chicagoland. Stephen from Full Bars Media is producing this for me. Shared that we've had over 2,300 people listen or watch so far in the first month, a number which I have absolutely no context for, but it might stink, but it sounds like a good start. So appreciate everybody for checking it out. Share it with your friends and help your boy get $100 million deal like the other Joe that podcasts, right? So I'm stoked for this episode. We've got one of my favorite guys in the real estate business, Sal Becovic. Welcome, Sal.
Thank you for having me. This is the Joe Show, a.k.a. the Joe Show, Chicago style. All the podcasts out there that have a Joe, there's no Joe like this one, Chicago style.
Here we go, man.
And Joe, one thing before, I know we've been wanting to, so we've had countless of conversations over the years. Yeah. And we said after every conversation, we say, we got to have a podcast.
That's right.
And then all of a sudden you call me saying, I got to do a podcast. You're doing the podcast. I love so far everyone you've brought in.
Appreciate it.
Very insightful. And I'm looking forward to this. And I think we should always preface every podcast, especially in our business, after the week we're in right now. Because I think these conversations, we're going to call them conversation, are great time capsules. That if we can go back 5 years from now and say, what time period was that we were in? We are in, today is April 10th. We'll reference the date. I know this will probably go on in a couple weeks or so, right? Roughly around there. April 10th. We are in tariff nut week with Trump, with the Trump tariffs and the revoking of the tariffs and the markets they crashed yesterday. They jumped 10%. Bonds went 40 bips up, 40 bips down. So as of today, the 5-year, which is something that a lot of our operators that place debt is 4%, 4.0%, and the 10-year is 4.37.
Yep.
Where it was just 2-3 weeks ago was 450, 460. So rates have come in. So all this Trump stuff has actually been beneficial for us, for rate wise. But we'll see what goes.
Where everything shakes. But I think it's smart to kind of put a timestamp on this thing because we'll talk about things that are a little bit into the weeds, that are a little bit time specific, and then we'll talk about some high level just business planning and how you think about the business. But we're going to talk a little bit later about how you kind of balance that. That eye to the macroeconomic conditions with your,
and that's what we're talking.
Animal spirits.
There's that, and there's also
before we get too far, I gotta tell everybody who you are, because I know a lot of people know you. I take it for granted, but this will give you some credibility.
I'll go ahead and.
Sal is the president of Becovic, which is a family-owned real estate firm that is rooted in the North Side neighborhoods that they work in today, Rogers Park, Edgewater, and Uptown. I love this from your website. We're dedicated to fostering the diversity, integrity, beauty, and vitality of the neighborhoods. We do this through continuously investing in our buildings and improving residents' homes and lives. There's a lot in there that we're going to kind of get into more through the conversation. To give some context about Sal's portfolio, he took the reins in 2003 and has grown the firm from a portfolio of 400 units to over 2,000 today, across over 70 buildings, I believe. So a very important part in those neighborhoods, which have been home to him for a long time and to his business. So cool to have you on. It really is.
I appreciate the
cool what you've accomplished.
Thank you for the
I might toot your horn a little bit, but I'm gonna, after we're off the camera, I'm gonna
thank you for the
thank
you for the context. But what keeps me straight is the song that we kicked off our podcast with, is this idea of Bob Dylan. He's in the zeitgeist now with his movie. And I think the great Kendrick had the Be Humble song of the most of the culture right now, Be Humble. The song of the 60s and 70s, I think late 60s, is Gotta Serve Somebody, Bob Dylan. And if you listen to that song, it's in our business, as an owner of properties that are over 50, 60, 70, 100 years old.
Yeah.
There's a service of our resident.
Yeah.
There's a service of that property. There's a service of that neighborhood. And then guess what? There's also the service of our banks. And there's the service of our people. And it becomes this, everyone's got to pay somebody kind of thing. And I kind of want this conversation, if someone's listening to this conversation, I think there's 3 audiences. I think typically the first audience you want this to be is going to be our people of our business, right? People of our
folks that we see at the neighborhood events, service providers.
People are in this business, the brokers that provide and that also manage and own apartment buildings in the city. But if there's other audience that I hope listens to this, as we dig into this conversation, is the policymakers of this city. Yeah. When it comes to the policy, and also our residents. I want my resident to, one of our residents or any resident out there who wants to do a search, because it's easy to. I mean, this is going to be on YouTube and podcasts and everything. Is I want people to understand. We have a connotation of the greedy landlord. We have a connotation of. There's some connotation, and then we're in a period of label making. Yeah, we're shooting labels at people and trying to define people. And my hope is this conversation, we can really dig in and get a sense of how important our work is, and how important our work is to the city overall. I love you're a booster of the city. Where I'm not allowed to say anything negative about it.
It's absolutely right.
Okay, you said that. That's the one thing.
One rule.
There's one. You're not going to crap talk.
To be honest, I don't have to worry about with you, because I know that you're a staunch proponent of the city and advocate for positivity in the city too.
I'll say,
but that is my rule.
The first thing I'll advocate for is my neighborhoods, and we operate in 3 neighborhoods. I was Albanian Muslim kid, went to Catholic school, St. Gertrude in Edgewater.
Oh, my buddy.
The Holy Trinity. Yeah. Uptown, Edgewater, Rogers Park. That's what we focus on. Yeah. And we'll go into the story. Yeah. And there's a story which I really
We're gonna get into the story, which actually I'm not. Don't take this as me being dismissive. Quite the opposite. I cannot wait for you to share the story of your family's start in the neighborhood. Yeah. But before we get there, we're gonna do some rapid fire. Okay. I'm not. Everybody says they like the rapid fire, so I'm not letting you off the hook.
Okay. Let's do it.
What'd you listen to on the way here? Rapid fire. I remember.
Economist. Okay. The Economist is a weekly news magazine. It talks about highly recommended, great analysis. They're kind of a middle ground. Kind of, they talk about everything from politics to finance, economics, culture. Very good magazine. Okay. Economist. The Economist.
Favorite Chicago.
I listen to it. I don't read it. There's a magazine, but they also they have a.
That counts. Do it in the car.
A nice British lady
exercise.
reading it.
Favorite Chicago coffee shop.
The one that Metropolis in Edgewater. And let me say you. I know it's one word. Can I give you a little context on Metropolis?
Go ahead.
Metropolis, and here's the point of how.
You're going to say that the scones are the bomb? Because you got me on the scones.
They're good. But you get it. I'm not here to boost the idea of a coffee shop beyond the $4, $5 coffee, which, the older I get, I just make the pods. Yeah. But it's the idea of how when you create, and I think our job as an owner of a property, is to be able, and I feel that's the first thing that needs to happen is good housing, and then good solid housing, and then all of a sudden that's where everything else comes from. Coffee shops in my neighborhood. Metropolis came in 2003 in Edgewater on Granville. Yeah, and that area in Edgewater for many years in the 80s and 90s went through some challenging times, and we'll tell a story about that. But to see when you start having coffee shops that start adding to what you're doing, that's that circle.
It's all part of the
self-reinforcing circle that. So I'm a big fan of coffee shops, and they have awesome
community,
scones.
right?
Yes.
I mean, it really is. We talk about restaurants, coffee shops, housing. It's all part of the ecosystem. Part of what makes a neighborhood a neighborhood. What would you be doing? No, okay. I'm not skipping ahead to that one. Favorite pizza place?
Hole in the wall, and we got a surprise. Gigio's.
We're gonna do a little Dave Portnoy later.
As someone who grew up in Edgewater, The pizza that was my go-to, GGO's Hole in the Wall, right off of Broadway, 4700 Broadway?
4650.
Yeah, something like that. A Hole in the Wall, you go in, great people. It's been around 30, 40 years. They do like a New York style slice. And we have some also. Yeah, you cut it square. You didn't do slices. You did squares, which is fine.
Squares.
That's fine. Yeah, you're right. We're going to share with everybody. GGO's.
I just told them, give me the Sal Becovic. They did the cheese.
Oh my goodness.
Extra crispy. Anyway.
Listen, I'm 46 years old. I'm not by now. I'm not frequenting it the way I did in the 20s, no doubt. They forgot me.
What would you be doing if you weren't in real estate? Because it's hard. It's hard to.
If I didn't have
doing anything other than
once again we're going to talk about my family story and the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing now. But if I didn't have the kind of gravity of the work and the purpose of the work, I studied broadcast journalism and Northern Illinois University. So and then I got into media management, and I would by now, with the way the media landscape has gone, I'd probably open up a YouTube channel and do reviews or something.
There you go.
But that's my background.
Okay.
It would be something managing the media as opposed to in front of the camera. It'd be more managing an operation, most likely.
Cool.
Yeah.
Favorite intersection or corridor in the city?
I've listened to this show from the other guys, and there were a lot of the Damon and Logan Square, the Damon and what was it? Damon and North.
Damon North Avenue, Milwaukee.
And to me, though we have one property in Logan Square in that corridor, Broadway and Lawrence. There's nothing when it comes to the culture of this city.
Yeah.
You have the Green Mill. You have the Riviera. You have the Aragon. When it comes to the culture of this city, it's hard to find any corner that has affected the culture of this city more than that corner. Put me down for Broadway and Lawrence.
I like it, man. Red line, close to train still, too. All right. This is the last rapid fire. Plug an up-and-coming Chicago real estate person that you feel deserves a little love.
Okay, well, I'm 46. I got 8 years on you.
You're not up.
I got 8 years.
You've come up. You're plugging yourself right now.
No. Listen, slow down.
I'm just messing.
Slow down. I'm not going to plug you now. I'm done plugging you. Is a young guy. About 7-8 years ago, I saw in this business, and we never did deal. But all of a sudden, he did enough work, and he brought me a few deals. And the way he was managing me was finesse, comfortably, and seriously. Joe Schmazel.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, I have to say it.
That,
and
man.
By now, I'm surprised this office isn't called Joe Terra Realty.
No, we got an awesome crew.
I'm just gonna cause problems with you right now. This place should be called Joe Terra Realty after what you did last year. How much? 150 mil.
Something like round numbers. Something like that.
You better not cut this out. The only deal you didn't sell.
Yeah. Dickens Courtyard, man. Dickens Courtyard.
I know. And I'm glad. And I'm glad I didn't.
I know.
We'll talk. I'm
not going to cut it out because it's real.
It's real.
We're pro Chicago, but we're still real.
I had a deal just to give us the only property was, and I have nightmares that I'd sell properties. I'll wake up in the middle of the night and say, there's one particular moment. I wake up in the middle of the night and I say, I had a dream I had sold a property. I woke up because that's not our model, and we'll dig into that. And I said to myself, why did I sell it? Is there some kind of omen? Is it like, you would sell from like some level of distress, some level of like serious life event or moment. And I was trying, and that whole day messed me up. I'm thinking, and it wasn't this particular one that we were talking about at Logan Square.
Yeah.
And the reason why we're looking at that, and now forget about it after all this ordinance stuff, which we'll probably talk about later.
No.
We might a tad on it. The idea of policy for the policymaker,
okay,
I think we have to probably touch on it. I looked at it because I never had interest in growing that supply in Logan Square. It was one of the legacy properties that my parents acquired, and that story I can't wait to tell. But we decided to, obviously the market wasn't where we wanted it to be, and we'll have a property in Logan Square.
Yeah. All right, we've kind of alluded to it. I want you to tell the story of your folks, and I'm going to give a little context before you do. I've known Sal for, like you said, 10 years or so. Have a close relationship, had an appreciation for kind of the foundation of the family, but recently I was lucky to attend the 50-year celebration of the family business. And truthfully, I wasn't like, that night I just like wasn't really in the mood to go to an industry event, but I was like, I want to go. It's, this is, somebody who I really like. I want to go. And I came home. I was like, that was very inspiring. Not tooting your horn, like not, this isn't like just for the sake of,
appreciate that,
for gassing you up, but it was very inspiring. So, share with us
tell me what inspired you the most.
Hearing, I think a lot of people would see you today having this portfolio, being a second generation steward of the family business and somebody who's kind of had your foot on the gas the whole time, but not have a full appreciation for what it took for your folks to provide that base, provide in like how they came here. I'm not going to tell the story. And then not only for the business that you are the leader of, but you have two brothers who have separate business lines who are also wildly successful in real estate. And it all started with, this. That's what inspired.
It all started. I got to tell you a story. Yeah. We've been, okay. Once upon a time, there was a union painter and an office cleaning lady. 1968, after 3 years of living in France, Paris, France, that union painter, Sal Becovic, my father, always never felt Paris, because from before Paris it was Yugoslavia, because we're Albanians living in Yugoslavia. Now it's Montenegro, where we are. And that union painter had a painting job in Paris, and that office cleaning lady did some odd work in Paris. 1968 Paris. And that was a crazy time, 1968 in Paris too. But my father, that union painter, was waiting for his paperwork for years, 2-3 years, because if he could cross the border, he would have already crossed the border. And that's why anyone that talk about, I did it the right way. You did it the right way because that was the only way you can do it back then. But if that's why I don't fault anyone who tries to, from Mexico and from Canada and all the. So, anyways, we're getting into that talk. Let's get out of there. But he waited for his paperwork, got his paperwork. November 1968, very volatile time. So they moved into Chicago, uptown, for 5 years. He rented 5 years. Right away, he got a job, and and to this day, I love it. We live in the city. And he'll drive by and you'll see Lake Point Tower. Huh. Lake Point right now.
The only one east of Lake Shore Drive.
And here's a guy, and I want to talk about him objectively, because if I start getting a little of my butterflies and get a little emotional. He says, and to see a guy, and to see that ethic, and to see pride. Because in 1968 is when that building came up, and that was a big deal.
It was kind of controversial because they figured out a way to build it east of Lake Shore Drive.
On the other side,
sort of like podium. That was like
So that building, that curved building, in black, for a lot of people listening, and there's the younger people out there. So I think it's important to know how important that building was to the city, how a big deal it was to the city. And my dad mentioned. And he said, I used to work at that building. I painted at that building. And after what he's been able to do, and the kind of the work he's been able to do as a businessman, and for him to show the kind of pride that, and to remember, he came in when he was 28 years old. He's in his late 20s. So anyways, to show that it's just back to the core of like what makes the gratification of the work and of the craft, and the pride that he had to work in that building, which was a big deal building, right? So anyways, so 5 years they lived in Uptown, rented, right in Clifton, right where Truman College is now. Truman College wasn't
Racing
there.
And Wilson,
right there. Further on the other side, where Truman College is, cool. On the north side of the south side of where the Target is, behind the Target there. Yeah. And they lived there at that time. There were some old apartment buildings there, and there's a lot of Montenegrins that moved in. That's why we have just a good community, and they all kind of almost overtook the building, right, in the late 60s, 68 all the way to 73. And for 5 years, my mom would take the train and work at 300 North Michigan, right here.
Not far,
right here. She'd be office cleaning lady. And my dad was a union painter, so he would work for Local 1. We would paint across the city for 5 years, And then after 5 years, and they would rent. And there's this community of other Montenegrins, and they just built a great, very, very vibrant community. And to this day, when they talk about it, it's how important it was to be able to get these new people that they didn't know many people.
Yeah.
And after 5 years, my dad, that union painter, someone brought up an idea. There's an apartment building in Albany Park. And at that time, Albany Park was a courtyard kind of walk-up building, circa 1900 built.
Yeah.
And my dad's like, I'm tired of paying rent. My dad was always very motivated, and just there's a level of vision and ambition he had.
Yeah.
He didn't have any college. He didn't have any education. So no education. This is just a hardworking. They didn't have education at that. After the 1940s in Montenegro, Yugoslavia, there was no education. The schools were all recovering from World War II. So anyways, the idea is that, you know what? Can I buy it on a purchase mortgage? I'll pay. And he saved money. He was very frugal.
So this is early 70s.
1973.
Yeah. Okay.
1973.
Yeah.
So he's 33 years old.
Yeah.
And at that time he had 2 kids. I wasn't born yet, and my younger brother wasn't born. He went ahead and did a purchase mortgage, because at that time, getting debt for properties in our neighborhood, you couldn't get debt. You couldn't go to a Chase or Marquette or whatever, pick a bank.
You can't play favorites on here.
I've never done deal with it. But anyways, I'm just anyways, any bank out there. So he did purchase mortgage, put a little equity down. It's like, the way this is going to work is I got to live in there. And then the idea is I'm going to live in there. And then the residents there, I'll take care of the building, because that's what I do.
Yeah.
But it was kind of funny. My mom tells a story. He was a painter, but he didn't fix stuff.
For a little context, though, this is all.
And are we doing the Joe Rogan style? Is this going to be 3 hours, right? Because I can really dig in.
We got somebody else coming. We got pizza. We hold them over. But for context, this is, I think, around a 24-unit building. I don't know exactly, but within 5 units.
It was,
is
exactly. A 17-unit.
Okay.
17 unit.
So a little off, but
close. Big layouts.
Right. So this is not like living in a 3-flat. Yeah. This is a bit of an undertaking from a management standpoint.
It's kind of funny how my mom says this, and that's why I'm telling a story because it's a story that a lot of people can relate to.
Yeah.
And just hearing how 2 hardworking, uneducated people just made this work for them, is he went in thinking, I'm going to live in the building, and there are big layouts too, much bigger, nice, better apartment than the one they lived in Uptown.
Yeah.
And I'm going to live in there, and then some of the residents are going to pay their rent, and they'll pay my rent at least. And maybe I might make something, but I'm still going to keep my job.
Yeah.
And honey, you're still going to keep your job. Okay.
There was just this aversion,
and it's like
of paying rent, and wanted to.
Yeah, it's not like, oh, I'm going to be a real estate mogul now.
Right. No, it's just like
this is the beginning of my empire. No, none of that.
So
he moved in. Lived in there, and then I got, when I was born in 70, and then kind of funny, then he bought the building across the street, like 2 years later, another purchase mortgage, and then he bought the building across the train tracks. Guess what? He still kept his job, and then he went partners with a guy on another building. The only deal that turned into crap, and then he got out of it fast, which is, and then but anyways, those 3 buildings, and then he sold one of them in Uptown, and then the opportunity. And this is where this question of next level, and this is where we can equate it to building any kind of business, is doing things to push yourself to get to that next level. And that
something gives you you got a little fire in your belly about it. It just makes you think a little, makes you sweat a little bit. It's
So here's what happened. Now, 76, though, he got to the point where he had the 3 buildings. He's like, I'm going to go ahead and they furloughed. 76, the economy was not good. And they furloughed the painters wintertime. He's like, I'm not going to go back. I'm going full bore here. But honey, you still got to stay here because you got insurance. It's not like, so you got to still stay here, right?
But this is less than 10 years from moving to the United States.
This is 10 years. So he's like, I'm going to focus on this. Yeah. Honey, you need to work. Though my mom would work around the buildings and then go work second shift, cleaning, come back. And then, and most important, you had insurance. You had the local one insurance. Okay, at that time. Okay, fine. Here's the next step. 76. They have these 3 properties, and then he's like, okay, I could sell one, and then the idea of Edgewater, 6021 Winthrop, where I was born in Albany Park in that building, the first one. But then the big step was 6,000 block North Winthrop.
Yep.
It was 36 units, and then he bought the next 36 units the next year. It was one of those 4+1s, which at that time, 4+1s were 10-year-old product.
Yeah, right.
It was brand new renovation.
Most of those were 60s construction.
It was beautiful.
Yeah.
It was gorgeous.
Yeah.
The 4+1s. So the next step was where you push yourself to go to that next level was. He went to Edgewater. He bought that 36 units and the next 36, and that's where he met. And this is where we talk about mentors. Harry Toporek. I want his name to live in for the record. If my father had a mentor or if someone who protected him was a Nazi Jewish Holocaust survivor who went into that neighborhood. A lot of single fams in that neighborhood. And a lot of single family houses in that Winthrop Kenmore corridor, and a lot of developers in the 60s made them into 4+1s. And then
how about this for like a land of opportunity melting pot story? I mean, this is the American dream. Like, this is it, or an example of it. Because talk about like the mashup of cultures and how they arrived here, and it's all driven by ambition and opportunity, and Chicago represents that to a lot of people. So.
And let me dig a little bit more. So Harry Toporek, one thing is to have a seller who they just build a rapport, and to have a seller who also wanted to see he saw the drive in my father's eyes. Yeah. And that's where my dad ended up buying 3 or 4 properties from him. Yeah. The one, and this is a guy here at Toporek, very friendly, passed away 10 years ago. He lived until his 90s, but just to have a mentor. And then, so that's where you have these 2 uneducated immigrant people, and all of a sudden they own 72 units. They own over 100 units. After being in this country for 10 years, after 10 years, for 50, after 12 years, they had owned 100+ units, right now. And then here's what Harry would say. This is where that's why it's important to listen to each other and maybe to allow each other to influence each other for the good. Harry would say to my parents, it would say, ask my mom, why do you keep working? You have these 72 units. You have these other 100 units plus. Why do you keep working? If you rent, and they had a lot, vacancy was bad. Early 80s, and this is where I want to have some context of how history it doesn't repeat but rhyme. Early 80s was that period where we had high interest rates again. We had a drop down in 79, 80. Rates came down after they jumped in the late 70s, like 77. Yeah. They came back down to 8 in 1980, and that's what gave Animal Spirits. We're going to hear about this Animal Spirits to my dad to buy in Winthrop, in that corridor. But then all of a sudden rates jumped again. And then the neighborhood, with that, a lot of people moved out, and the neighborhood. A little bit of its gusto. So my dad, when he went into Edgewater, he didn't go into thinking I'm here to change the neighborhood. The neighborhood was good.
Yeah. Oh,
so it went to crap after he had bought those units. So this goes to the idea. Let me get this out because before I forget, a lot of people say what you do is not right. What we do is not rocket science. It's not rocket science. It doesn't require a level of science of physics and all that educated stuff. It requires stomach. It's stomach science. And when things don't go accordingly, which I would equate to this period of time we're in now. Yeah. With high interest rates. So the only thing that hurt us, the only thing that my dad's situation, and a lot of operators in the early 80s had a problem where they had high interest rates going up and they had bad economy going down. And that's something we want to talk about, something that's protected us so far now. I know you want to say it.
So take one. I don't mean to interrupt. Okay. I know that this is something I'm not trying to interrupt you about something you're passionate about, but I'm going to ask you a question to expand on. So you mentioned to me in the past that your dad
sold me down. Yeah,
your dad had a hand-painted management sign that said, I don't know exactly what it said. I'm sure it said something like property is proudly managed by Hussein Becovic, phone number, address, whatever, okay?
Yeah.
And you are a very passionate operator of your buildings today. You're not an investor in the sense, you are an investor, but it goes hand in hand with owning and operating. So talk about like how that's instilled in your mentality towards this business, because he was not passive. I mean, I know what went into, what goes into operating 100 units today is challenging. Back then, different set of challenges, but certainly not any easier than it is today. So why is that at the core of your business?
I love how you remember that. I remember as I grew up, because we lived, one other big part of this is when we moved from Albany Park, we moved to Edgewater.
Yeah.
We lived with our residents, right? That was another part of this next step, which is just part of what makes what we did. If we were to look back and say why our family was successful, right? Why Sal and Muhammad and Isa and my younger brother, why we've been, and my brother Dino have been successful, and it's really from the core of serious in the business where it's not passive. So my dad, one big thing was, I remember he would put this aluminum sign up for rent, and we had a neighbor, Larry, one of our neighbors. He had a parakeet. I grew up with him, Miss Cooper. We had Larry. We had Earlene Matthews. To this day, we have residents that were part of family.
Yeah.
When we in the early '80s. In fact, I still have one left, Earlene Matthews, in the early '80s. She's living with us at 6021 North Winthrop. Shout out to her. She came to our 50th. So it really was like part of family.
Yeah.
It's like we're trying to get this through together livelihood, right? And then we're going to talk about incentives, right?
Yeah.
Make sure we talk about incentives, how incentives are a part of anything we do, and especially anyone that doesn't want to make incentives part of housing. Which there's this question of there should be incentives, there should be no incentives, or houses should be.
Let's go off track because you're on.
Let me just say this real quick. But that sign that he put up there was so inspiring to me, because what he did is he put the number for rent, Becovic Management. Not like some generic name. He said, we're going to put our name on it because buck stops with us. We're not hiding. We're not here to hide from what we do. We're management. That's our job. That's our profession. That's what we're striving to do better on. That idea emanates through everything we've done all up through this period. We manage our own stuff. Anyone, and I'll say this now, I'm going to lay the gauntlet down. Anyone who's serious about this business, who want to make this their livelihood, multifamily, owning, managing, if you are not managing your own stuff, and if you're giving it to all these third parties, you're not serious. You have to dig in and take over the reins of this management. I know some of these third parties are not going to like it, but anyone that has a side job and doing the side, okay, you're a doctor, give it to Peak, give it to Kagan, give it to all these other guys. All right, God bless Mike Zucker, you had him on. But if you're serious about this business, you got to manage it. You got to be digging in.
When you, my wife and I bought some little six flats and stuff, and we've always just named them the Address LLC basically, and we were going a year or so ago to kind of make it a little bit more of a brand, and we're like, what's the name gonna be? It's gonna be something abstract. And it's like, I reminded myself of Becovic Management, Hayes Properties, you mentioned Kagan Management, Beal, it takes, a family name. And it's like, if we're not, I said to Kate, is like, it's not about being cocky about this is what we do. It's about, if we're not willing to put our name on the side of the building to set the tone about being prideful for the way that we run our, these are small potatoes, but the way that we run them, that sets the tone for everything. Like, if you're not proud enough, like, it's not because I want to see my name on my sweatshirt, kind of the opposite. Yeah. It's more so
you're owning it.
Yeah. It's like you have to stake your name, and so.
We're going to mention a book that I read. I'm in the process of reading Joko, Extreme Ownership.
Yeah.
Let me touch on
wake up at 3 in the morning,
you're giving me the opening. That's too extreme. That's too extreme. But let me touch on what you just said there. And I love this story that you're telling me, and you mentioned it with your wife, and there's not many, I'd say very rarely, are there businesses where you're a broker or selling or you're a dealer that you need to take your own supply. And what you're doing, you actually saying, I'm not just selling these apartment buildings, I'm not just brokering these apartment buildings, but I'm also putting the skin in the game and growing my own portfolio, and I'm doing it with my wife, and I'm working hard, and I'm also taking on that management, and I'm digging in. God bless you, Joe.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
I would say that's the kind of thing that has to happen.
I appreciate it.
And in fact, that's the kind of that's the kind of that's what makes our city such a great place to invest. There's so many opportunities for investment and to add value and to the more different ownership we have, a lot of mom and pop ownership we have makes things so much more vibrant. And this is for the policymaker now. Anything that the policymaker is going to do that destroys someone like Joe and his wife to be able to manage a 20 how many units you got right now?
30
a 30 unit portfolio, and you make it hard for him to operate that, you're going to hurt the city, and the city will stop progressing and will go the wrong direction, just like it went in the wrong direction in the early 80s, where neighborhoods like Edgewater went to crap because high interest. Let me say because high interest rates do that. High interest rates, when you go in the mid-'80s, 80s to the 84, until then they had the final drop. Volcker killed inflation, right? We had this tremendous rise of interest rates, which then what happens is it allows the owner-operator, the person owning that property, no opportunity to make any money because a lot of these loans were resetting and destroying them. And this is something we want to make sure we talk about.
Well, you have interest rates are a component of it, but when you talk about the regulation, and it's a fine line. It's tough because my wife is a speech therapist by trade, and she does more of the day-to-day than I do. Yeah. But, I know all the rules and regulations because I'm so, in the weeds with this business. But if you make it so complex to run these buildings that a good person trying to be fair to people just, can't keep up with all the different documents you're supposed to give and all the different rules on exactly how many days, it's like the reason why you're saying, part of the reason why you're saying it's bad for the market is because the mom and pop owners like that are a very important part of the ecosystem of ownership and management of being a housing provider in the neighborhoods. If you want to make it so complex that we can't keep up with everything you have to do, and it takes so much bandwidth, then it's going to continue to lead more and more towards very large, corporate, institutional type owners, which I would venture to guess that most residents would prefer not to be their housing provider in every case, right? So I hope that somebody that it should be more of a conversation.
And to put like a cap on, and to put a cap on that, I love that. And to put a cap on that is performative policy making doesn't work. Gotcha. Performative policy making to play gotcha. With housing providers and owners and of apartment building is not the right way to go.
Well, and it's
so counterproductive, and it's dangerous for neighborhoods.
I agree. Let's also say that we're two guys that have talked before about we're not scared. I'm not scared of. Take your broker license, for example. I wish the broker license was 5 times as hard to get. I want the bar to be raised as hard as it gets. When the market gets competitive and difficult and there's a lot of choppiness, that's when, frankly, I get ahead. When the market is choppy as it's been, that's when you get ahead as an operator because you have a team that's very sophisticated. So sometimes we benefit from this because it raises the bar to a point where you have to be kind of towards the top of what you do to keep up. But there has to be a balance. There has to be an eye towards being pragmatic, being realistic about, we've gone too far.
and let me add to what you're saying. You would take more tests. There should be brokers to be on top of their business. You want serious brokers. Same thing as you want serious operators. And And listen, you can go ahead and regulate when it comes to certain things like lease renewals, making sure that there's a more, people, landlords, housing providers can't, just jack up rent without notice. Right? There's some things that as knowing how important what we do is in the ecosystem, right? We are, and once again, I'll put this on the table, and someone can debate. I think I'll win it. Is what we do as an owner of owner and operator of apartment building is probably the most important thing, that the core thing for a neighborhood, right, is that housing of that neighborhood. And also when it comes to that relationship that we have with a customer, like any business relationship, business to customer relationship, owner to customer relationship, I would argue that our relationship is the most intense relationship than any relationship, even with your doctor or even with any other. Our relationship, housing manager, property manager with customer, with resident, is the most intense. They're making their biggest monthly payment to you. You are managing their you are protecting their home 24/7, right? It's like it's not like a bad cup of coffee. Oh, I had a bad cup of coffee. I'll go back to the coffee shop. Okay, they didn't do the espresso right?
Some people shy away.
It's very sensitive. It's very sensitive.
Some people shy away from that responsibility.
Yeah, it's stomach science.
And they're just like, this is a transaction. I pay for shelter. You pay me rent. No, it's way more intimate than that. I agree. It's like as deep of a relationship as you can have with your customer and the community of the buildings. Yeah. So how do you, anybody just listening could tell the passion and sincerity you have for that. You have a team now of over 50 people.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that this is something that you're harping on so that everybody kind of carries that same, look, we're stewards of these communities and these homes, and that it goes much deeper than they just pay our rent and we, give them a roof over their head and make sure that the building is clean enough. So how do you instill that into the team too?
Well, first is making sure you instill it within yourself and you realize it. And what really helped me kind of get that kind of like holy cow moment was pandemic. When you have your product and your service being used at full capacity, when you are the game in town, the only game in town, you can't go to you can't go to a bar, you can't go to the game, you can't vacation. Everyone's home. I mean, it was such a eye-opening moment. And I said to myself, you know what, guys, we are the game. This is what we do. It's hard to find. And I say this on the team. You cannot find, if you want a job, and we want career-minded people, you cannot find a more purposeful job and calling than to protect and manage someone's home, protect and manage a property, protect and manage a neighborhood. You can't find it anywhere.
I agree.
Any job that's more purposeful.
I agree, man.
So when I say that, it's very simple. I don't need to keep saying it to you. You're going to realize it yourself, especially if you live in a place. You're going to say how important it is that I trust the person who owns my property and manages my property.
By the way, I want to point out that this inflection point of COVID, as it related to the purpose of your business, was also with the backdrop of a lot of people painting our business as the bad guy because we still expected people to pay rent. I was so frustrated during that time because people would say, even like politicians and stuff would say, oh, cancel rent and all this. And nobody was petitioning that, somebody filled up their grocery cart and ran out of the grocery store. But as you've expressed, and I totally agree, the relationship is just as deep, or if not deeper, in your home. So it's a crazy doubling down at that point shows your conviction for the business.
Yeah.
So how is that?
Okay, wait, just touch on that real quick. I'm sorry. Okay, ask the question.
No, okay, because we're still on the topic because I love the passion for this mission, but so now you are at a significant scale. Your ownership is concentrated in 3 neighborhoods, very, very focused in 3 neighborhoods, right? And so when I think about how you've approached the business, it's changing neighborhoods too for the better. One that comes to mind, an area that comes to mind for me is Howard Street. Yeah. We worked on a building together that you have one of your offices in now on Howard Street, and the area north of Howard Street in Rogers Park is, one of the rougher. It was one of the rougher.
It was like
neighborhoods
the pandemic
of
time.
the north side.
If you want to watch The Wire.
So how have you seen it change?
Have you seen The Wire on HBO? That was that was Howard Street during the pandemic, and my 2024 wasn't very good. Too much blatant. I don't want to get into the too much blatant brazen crime taking place, and we continue to push through that and fight through that, and that's where the stomach science goes into play, right? So okay.
But so how is it, use Howard or the area north of Howard as an example, or somewhere else? But like, as this mentality compounds across your portfolio, how do you feel about that as a steward of the neighborhood in addition to just your properties? Because the way that Becovic runs their buildings has a lot to do with the vibrancy and community within those neighborhoods now. That's no small, those are probably the three most quintessential North Side neighborhoods in my eyes. I love Lincoln. I live in Lincoln Park, but it doesn't have the diversity. Yeah. So when you talk about Edgewater and you talk about Rogers Park and you talk about Uptown, like, show me three more Chicago neighborhoods than those where you have access to transportation, diversity, socioeconomically, diversity, culturally, restaurants, all these things. And you play a big part in those.
Yeah. And that's that. We play the song Serve Somebody. It's about keeping humble and making sure that you understand that we are stewards of those properties. Those properties will live beyond us, and the beauty of these properties, a lot of them and throughout the portfolio. If I would dig in, you got 100-year-old courtyard buildings. Yeah, that unfortunately, you got to go behind the wall. You got to be able to do the work. Trust me, I don't. I wish I didn't have to do the kind of work I had to do on these gut rehab and value add, probably called value add. Right now, I have Sal musings by the end of the show. Remember, we're going to go over Sal musings.
We've carved out a little time at the end. You've Sal made that musings. Clear. I understand.
I'm going to say one right now. We talk about value add. Now it's value ... Right?
Question mark.
It's like ellipsis. Value ellipsis. That's the three dots. What we have to do is, when you're fully committed, and once again, this is 50 years in the making, right? Yeah. When you go into it with a long-term thinking in your head, you're going to do the work you do in that property. You get ahead of the curve and you do the work, because you don't have any plans on selling that property or speculating. And one thing I want to say, for the record, I want to be able to put this out here, in my business, in my neighborhoods. I'm not going to say downtown. Downtown's a different beast. Let's say even some other neighborhoods that are a little bit more speculative. I want owner operators. I'm not a fan of the go in, go out kind of idea. Yeah. I'm not a fan of the speculating. The developing, fine, you can build in, and we can go into my angel and devil of what I think about development. But what makes a neighborhood vibrant is to know that an owner, and that we have a lot of long-time ownership in our markets. Yeah. And as long as they're serious about keeping their properties up to date and keeping them for the next generation. Yeah. Right? And investing in those properties for the next generation. You can't. It's hard to find something, an actor so more important than having those kind of people, and that's why the policymakers have to make sure they see that and they appreciate that, right? I have my alderman on the 49th ward, a good decent relationship. If she'd call me and say, "You want to buy? There's a certain property bad." Unfortunately, someone has just lost control of their property. Can you buy it? I'm like, yeah, can I buy it? Okay, yeah, well, okay, just put the wand on them. But yes, I appreciate that. I appreciate when I have.
But it's a very sincere compliment.
Yeah, and when I have aldermen and alderwomen calling me saying, "Hey, look at this problem. Great, I love it. Thank you for thinking about me." Yeah. But yes, there's this level of full commitment and long-term investing that all of a sudden it's like, you know what, and And one thing we don't want to do, and I want to be able to state this, I'm not sure where you're going with questions here. Keep me on track here. But this idea of making sure, and this is back to the policymaker, right? And this is, and maybe our resident, and obviously our business people listening to this, is make sure you're not doing anything, any policies that make it punitive for a housing provider or owner of property to manage their property. Because one thing, if you're going to put in certain laws that make it hard to bring in good neighbors to a property.
Well, let's talk about this. Okay. So here, I mean, the next two topics are going to seem at odds with each other, but I think it's going to make sense as to why that I want to ask you about.
So I could do. How much we got here? Yeah, it's like we only got like 30. We got another 2 hours here.
We got so.
You're not editing none of this stuff.
No, we don't.
You better not. Okay, good.
We kept
you better
it raw.
not edit
we kept it raw every time.
Okay,
so,
keep it raw. Okay.
Rent increases and how there's a portion of those that are kind of like playing offense and playing defense, but like, maybe, there's an incentive component to it, this ability for your work to be able to be rewarded and make money from doing it, I don't think is a bad thing. First of all, the second
the incentive.
Incentive.
Oh, the idea of incentive.
Yeah, the idea of making money is like.
So I can continue to do it. So
Isn't
I don't give
crazy?
It back to the bank, Joe.
So, okay, so you don't give it back, but also, I mean, like real estate taxes, maintenance, all of your insurance. I mean, like the renovation of these buildings that's required every so often. Like, so pretend like you're talking to, our audience of service providers, and owners and brokers and stuff, lenders in real estate. They're going to be more, talk to us as if you were pretend there's a tenant listening or a policymaker listening on why rent increases are an important part of your business.
Okay. Especially in an inflationary environment, especially, and any environment, to be able to make sure you can sustainably manage a property where the incentive of that owner of that property is still there for them to keep doing it.
Yeah.
When, let me just equate it very simply. You go to your boss. You're gonna have a meeting with your boss. Say, boss, my rent's up. My car loans are up. My interest rate.
I'm commission only, so this is rhetorical pretending.
Okay, boss, I need a raise. I hope I deserve it. Yeah. I hope I deserve it. I hope you feel like I'm a valuable. You want to make sure you're going to get that raise.
Okay,
I'll say this to the young bucks out there.
Let
me say this. Let me just say this to the young bucks out there. This is probably just I talked the negotiation for your. Make sure you're going to. You can get that raise.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to end up not having a job by the end of it. Because where your perceived value is, you make sure that your boss thinks the same thing.
Well,
you got to make sure you know that.
And
right?
I know you're tying this to your conversation with your residents.
Yes. But there's a question. Let me just finish. Let me finish this. So you go to your boss and you ask for that raise, and hopefully the boss gives you that raise because he feels like you earned it. Guess what? You just had an incentive to keep doing what you're doing. And to keep working where you're doing. I mean, anyone that questions the incentive of an owner of a property, knowing that that property, especially in this very housing constrained period in time, that we need as much good housing as possible, that if that owner is not able to keep managing that, then they're gonna let it go.
There's this fallacy in the marketplace that there's these are high margin buildings.
Yes,
it is not.
Yes.
It is.
Let me just throw an example. Let me just bring an example. Let me just bring an example. There's a property, and I'm still kind of like taken aback a little bit. Right off of Jarvis and Ashland, we had some bad metal porches. It was a new property. We took it over about 10 years ago. Great property, beautiful property, right off the train tracks there on Jarvis. And but we inherited, they got really bad after a few years. Metal porches, and unfortunately with that metal, it was very hollow metal.
Mm-hmm.
They did the job crappy. Can I say shitty? Okay.
Yeah, I think there's probably
they
just
did
a certain
shitty job.
number of times we can't say
okay,
before
there's
it becomes
okay, and then we get flagged. Okay, that's fair.
Yeah. No F-bombs,
yeah,
probably?
no, okay, no F-bombs. No
Unless it's an
problem.
emergency?
That's okay. No, I'm not going to say it. No. My wife is going to, she'll ding me on any swear word. So when we end up having to do over 120 grand, new porches. A year and a half of income on that property. Hold on. A year and a half of income for that property.
We just
Who can? So there's this level of people understanding that properties depreciate, and it's not just idea of the depreciation tax. Properties depreciate, and for a serious operator, they depreciate. They depreciate. They deteriorate. Call it whatever you want. They cost a lot to maintain. Now, if you throw in high inflation, where you throw in now, which we're going to talk about, is how we're going to manage this period of time, right? This moment in time, this podcast, this conversation is a time capsule of this time right now. I hope we're going to go back at this time and say, oh, wow, that was the worst period. Because my hope is this is not the beginning of stagflation. My hope is not the beginning of high rates and low economy and recession.
From your lips to God's ears. So that's an example you gave of capital expenditure wiping a year and a half of profit.
Yes.
In concert with higher real estate taxes, higher assessed valuation, higher insurance, higher labor for your team. So it's not even just that in a vacuum.
Not even that. Okay? Very simple. Let's go dig into this. I want to be a detective because everyone's a detective online these days. Very simple. You get for renewal on the renewal question. Have a resident go in there and you can find the PIN number of your property, and do that. Maria Pappas, our treasury, our Cook County, our treasurer. Has a very nice, the Treasury website has a great setup of the last 20 years of taxes for that property.
Yeah.
And you're going to see they doubled in 20 years.
Yeah.
So it's like this. Everyone's got to serve somebody. We're back to everybody got to serve somebody. We got to serve the city. We got to be and the city wants theirs. So anyway, so you have to be able to manage that. And if you don't manage it sustainably, now you have another question that you have right now. Outside of your operating costs, outside of your water bills, outside of your gas.
Yeah.
We've been a little fortunate with gas because the gas has been lower than historical over the last 20 years. That's been our saving grace. But everything else, when it comes to operating, has exploded. Now, let me say this. What happens now? What happens this? Debt. So your debt question becomes very, very focal right now. And this is where back to my parents' story, is in the early 80s. And they took advantage of some of that because they slowly were able to buy properties because people were caught off guard because a lot of their loans reset in a high interest rate environment, and they had to give the property back to the bank. And this is something we're going to have to be very mindful of, and we can talk about that.
Well, there's an element of survival to it, making sure that the buildings.
There's survival.
Yeah. So now, the next topic is going to seem like kind of a stark transition, but I think it also gives context to, you just partnered. One of the cooler articles I've seen recently was you partnered with PO, the Preservation of Affordable Housing, and I think I read it. I shot you the note. I said, "This is a really cool initiative, dude." And so, anybody that after you just heard Sal's perspective on why rent increases are necessary, but then you also have affordable housing as a core, like a core foundation, core value, a core component of your portfolio.
Affordable, better housing.
There you go. Okay, so talk about. I'm bringing up the topic of the POA partnership. Yeah. Talk about why that's important to you. Talk about how it's gone and what you're doing.
So we had that's an example of how we had this group on Wilson. They had a property, an old tired 100-year-old property that required extensive work, and they have residents there. They have contracts with residents where well, let me backtrack. Let me step back a little bit. You cannot kumbaya better housing. You can't sing Kumbaya and get better housing. Better housing, you need to commit to it. You have to spend it. You have to invest in it. You can't Kumbaya it.
So they had that realization.
And the idea is what they said. They reached out to us because we have a number of properties in Uptown, Edgewater, Rogers Park, right? That's the whole of Trinity. And they said, you know what, Sal? We have 34 households. We have 34 households. That's actually very pretty. Is that East Lake Terrace? Is that East Lake? That's East Lake Terrace.
We're gonna keep this so nobody think we lost our.
That's Mongolia. Okay.
All right, we're back. We're back to Windy City.
We're not adding none of this. This is not being edited. So you cannot kumbaya better housing. You can't kumbaya it. You have to spend the money and make the effort and make the full commitment to it, right? So now they reached out to us saying we have our households, our residents. Yeah. We want to keep them. They have contracts with affordable housing providers.
That's right, but they've got a building that's becoming functionally obsolete.
Yeah, it's functionally obsolete.
But they can't.
Which I love because I love that they're doing that because I'm a big believer that these properties, I don't want to tear them down.
Yeah.
These are beautiful relics of the past.
Yeah.
I mean, you'd see a courtyard building, a 100-year-old courtyard building built in 1921. You see, that picture, that courtyard. You know why they built it that way? The big front yard, the big open corridors, the big ventilation corridors every side, because they built it because they had a pandemic in 1918, and their building codes was, you know what, we need as much ventilation and airflow as possible right now. So you have these beautiful properties that will never get built again. They're just never going to get because they didn't have the land, and so the land wasn't there. What we're going behind the wall. We're gutting them, and then there's a lot of rooms dining rooms that are never going to be used, and we make them into nice, gorgeous layouts. So anyways, what they're doing.
Go back to Poe. So what Poe's predicament?
Yeah,
go
exactly.
Back to their.
So these guys, they reached out to us, and they said we need to house our residents for a year, and you know what? We want to be able to. Can you help us relocate them amongst your properties? I said, you know what? I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
I love what you're doing. You're investing in that property. It's only going to be good for the housing stock. A better, safer housing stock we got to think long term. We can't get caught short-sighted.
Yeah.
In our neighborhoods, any policymaker, same thing. You cannot be thinking short term. Anyways, they come to us.
Yeah. Well, go to any any block that has a dilapidated large apartment building.
Yeah.
What does that do to the block?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter whether it's, affordable, whether it's market rate, whatever. It's like if there is a tired building that becomes an eyesore, it just becomes, it manifests through the rest of the block. It changes the feel. So the housing stock.
It's a cancer.
Yeah.
It's a cancer of the neighborhood.
So you guys have found homes for these residents.
So right now they're on a year lease. They handle all the rent payments at market rent. This is not a charity.
Yeah.
Guys, I have to support these properties. These properties have to support themselves.
Yeah.
This is not charity. I'll say, we'll find the.
How many residents have you?
34 different households.
Cool.
And the great thing about it is we got them into 3 different neighborhoods: Edgewater, Uptown, Rogers Park. And if you were to, we have a couple of them just that they're living in these apartments that are Class A properties. This is a Class A down the block. That you'd be getting, right? Because that's what
awesome,
we do. We're so and they're doing a great mission of upgrading their housing, and then after a year, that's the kind of cooperation.
It's an example of right, exactly, cooperation, collaboration across different organizations.
And also, let me say this, like programs like Section A, the voucher program.
Yeah.
I think they're great, as long as they can administer better and manage better and be up to date with what it takes to rent apartments.
It's a meaningful portion of your portfolio, right?
A good chunk of our residents go through the program.
Yeah.
So, and I love those residents because they also have skin in the game. There's this idea of skin in the game incentive. We're talking about incentives again. The resident is incentivized to not be a bad neighbor.
Otherwise, they can lose their
subsidy,
voucher,
right? And then we're incentivized because we're getting market rent for that property to help sustain that property. Because what you don't want to have is what happened. Now we'll talk about it. There's an article somewhere online. We had an organization, Better News Partners, right in north of Howard there on Jonquil. and there was a little pushback with, I was in the news about, we had to empty out the building because the building was seriously dilapidated. And this question, and
not cosmetically, real violations,
very unsafe.
Foundationally.
And let me for the record, our Alderwoman Haddon was very helpful with us to help work with us. She understood it. She saw it. She feels it's unfortunate that the unfortunate part is this: you have a non-for-profit owning that property, and they want to keep artificially those rents at very low levels. They can't maintain it. Yeah. And then you have an inflationary environment. Let me finish this. You have an inflationary environment, then all of a sudden chops people's heads off. You have no room to do anything because you're stuck at a top line that you can't move. And then all of a sudden the property becomes the point where we got it. How many rats we found in baseboards. I just the stuff that you find in these properties. So, anyways, I would say this.
That's what's. Hang on.
Let me say this. This is a soundbite. Let me soundbite. I got a soundbite. There should not be a choice. The false choice. There should not be a false. Make sure no, you're not going to edit this. There should not be a false choice between homelessness, and unsafe bad housing.
Yeah.
That should not be the choice.
It was similar.
And unfortunately, that was the choice for that property.
Yeah,
right?
Similar to what I was going to insert.
Resident, we gave them free rent, months of free rent. And then everyone moved out, and they got. And then the Alderwoman was very helpful to help us do that. But this false choice of homelessness and unsafe bad housing.
Yeah. Well,
that shouldn't be the choice.
Those things shouldn't be at odds. I agree. That
shouldn't be the choice.
Well, it's an example of
I'm going to stop talking.
I think oftentimes what's neglected in those articles about the owner coming in and renovating is there's this talk of displacing residents that need that type of housing. But if it's not safe for them to be there in the first place, then there shouldn't be this. Unfortunately, for some period of time, it was a bit of a public black eye because you didn't have the opportunity. And to your credit, you're forward enough about it to explain the other side and to get out ahead of it and to be communicative about your perspective on it. But there are instances where that happens and the owner is not so outspoken or doesn't have the same portfolio, that doesn't have the same credibility given all the good that you've done across your other buildings. So I think it's helpful to understand the perspective of sometimes why those situations come up. And there's certainly human, there's this neighborly way to handle that, and it's delicate. It's challenging. I mean, we talked about how serious your home is, so I'm not diminishing this the significance of somebody moving, but when it has to happen, it has to happen. And these are 100-year-old buildings. Yeah. So we're going to pivot for a sec. I want you to talk about a couple things that you alluded to earlier in the conversation is your eye towards macroeconomic conditions. Where are the treasuries? What are the trends? And you invest you invest in real estate as a sophisticated, in the know financial investor. But then you talk about having animal spirits, or how are the animal spirits feeling right now, or I got this angel and devil on my so how do you're kind of cerebral like that too, so how do you balance the Financial Times economist checking with you also kind of have to go with your gut sometimes, right?
I think I think at the end of the day, my number one thing that kind of keeps me, I'm in the game. I've made a decision, just like that union painter office cleaning lady. Let me just tell a story about the office union painter office cleaning lady real quick, and then tell you how in the game I am. There was a situation in the early '80s. Once again, the neighborhood went to complete crap in Edgewater, and Winthrop, very bad. And there was a big domestic disturbance. Someone shot a gun inside the car, inside the apartment. And the police were called. My parents called the police. My mom, the little small lady, she never had. She'd go in the front while you hanging out in the front, get out, no loitering. My dad was more low key, but he was the more division. But anyways, what happened? And my mom's a pistol. She's not afraid, and she would call the police. And we called the police. The police officer came early '80s, 81, 80, 82, 83. Then I was 5 years old. and I would play with the kids there, neighbor. I mean, it's like for me, anyways.
I can't wait to see how this connects with
okay,
question.
what, where's the story? Okay, let me say this. Here, we're good. This is how it connects. I think it's going to connect. And this is where the stomach science comes into play too, is when you have a police officer say, we want to be able to report this.
Yeah.
And the police officer says, what are you guys doing in this neighborhood? Get out of this neighborhood. My mom would never say, my parents would never say we own the property. We're janitors. We manage the property.
Yeah.
Right? They would never say that. We're just janitors.
Yeah.
Right? Because no owner would live here, right? And then my mom would say, "What? No, we work here. We work here. We we live here. This is our life." And he said, "You get out of this neighborhood. What are you doing in this neighborhood when you have a police officer?" And then kind of funny, my mom mentioned this recently. We have an attorney, another Jewish friend of ours, another one of those people that my parents leaned on, uneducated, quote unquote, people looking for support and looking to have their story told. Jerome Feldman, God bless his soul, another Jewish attorney. And my parents would tell Jerome this. He's like, "Did you get his badge number? Did you? No, my parents didn't. The immigrants, they don't make drama. They'll say, okay, that's what he told me, but that's just an example of this idea of when you're living, it's like your survival. You have no choice. You're gonna get through it. So back to you asked me, Sal, I'm fully committed. I'm in this. Pandemic happened, I'm in it. Recession happens, that's fine. As long as it's not another pandemic, I'm in it. So I'm digging in.
So
right?
Those components, that trusting your gut is ingrained.
Okay,
and then the balance,
there's that.
The balance of
there's that energy, Joe. Let me see. There's that energy.
I can tell
but
sometimes you have different appetite for different deals depending on what's going on.
So let me say this now. Let me just give you now the macro. We mentioned macro. Let's talk macro.
Yeah.
And let's talk about something we have to be mindful of. Is on the macro side, we've gone through yin and yang in the last 5 years. We've lived a century in the last 5 years, right? We had the 19th century in 5 years, right? We had crazy inflation. Yeah. We had crazy pandemic. We have war in Europe. We have what else is there? Am I missing? We have supply chain breakdowns. We have looting, full unrest. Yeah. Right, we had the Capitol freaking being stormed. We had freaking
political hostility.
We had the last 5 years was stacked.
Yeah.
Now, but that said, in our business, we went through early in 2021, 22. We had debt markets throwing money at you, operations getting through somehow, and then all of a sudden now our operations are top excellent.
Yeah.
But now debt markets is like you're flying through the Rocky Mountains, lots of turbulence, right? So it's something has to give. So now ask me, Sal, what are you doing now to make sure that this ship that you've created, which in our business, we're not nest egging. Here, Joe,
you're steering a big ship now.
Let me say this. Debt. Let's talk about debt. Let's talk about the balance sheet. Right, the balance sheet. Right, you want to make sure it's balanced. You don't want to make sure it's not here. Can you see this? You don't want to make sure it's here. You don't want to make sure it's here. You want to make sure it's like here, right?
Yeah.
Keep it. If you could do 50-50, 55, 60-40, if you can have 45, 50% equity, 45% equity, keep yourself that, you're good.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyways,
that's your marker.
How do you manage? Yeah. So that gives you a sense of things. All right. It depends on whose market values, right? I can be 80% equity on some people's market valuations, like Joe, if you're trying to get a deal.
Well,
I'm just
depends how hot
I'm teasing. So here's a sense of this to be mindful of. Is first, if you want to make this into a business, Joe. But let me ask you, Joe, as a multifamily operator, not. Take your broker hat off. As a multifamily operator, that's what you are. You are an owner-operator of those 30 units. You have debt on your properties?
Yeah.
Okay. You have at least 50% debt on your properties?
55.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Okay,
we're not far from
great. Okay, great. Leave it at that.
Yeah.
So the point is this. You are in this business, right? If you don't have any debt on this property, you are nest egging your apartment building.
Yeah.
Just know that now, and that there's nothing
so
wrong with that.
For you, it's an expense. For you, it's an expense of your business.
Yes.
Sometimes it can be to catalyze growth. Sometimes it can be, to be able to reinvest in a property.
Yes.
But it's an expense. It's part of the whole ball of wax that is owning an apartment.
Yes. So our model, and once again, I don't want to be out there. The developers have to make their money. They have to make their capital. The only problem I would say, the only issue I want to make sure that doesn't happen to those developers, and I've seen them. I've had them. I've met them. I've met 70-year-old guys say, I own 2,000 units in Rogers Park, and they're living in my 2-bedroom on East Lake Terrace, right? Yeah. And they're renting an apartment. And what happened, right? You don't want to. One thing with development, you have to make sure, and one thing I love what you're doing is you're in the business and you're deploying that, you're earning, you're deploying it in the business. So when you wake up one day, when you're 50, 60, you'll have 100, 200, who knows? God, you have your own stuff. And then you want to think about syndicating that and playing that game. That's another game you can think about while you're still doing this, right? That's
yeah, some of it's just this principle. I mean, like, at the end of all this, hard work, want to have something to show for it.
You don't want so that it's like here's the problem with development.
There's an idea of consumption smoothing, I think, is the economic principle. Consumption smoothing. As you get comfortable spending a certain amount consuming, and then all of a sudden it's like, I think lifestyle creep is a more common way to refer to it these days. Where like, if I don't find something constructive to do, we'll find another reason why to just kind of like inch up the lifestyle. Yeah. So there's some of that.
But say this, a word of warning to your young buck high flyer dealers, the deal makers, and the developers out there making the deals. All I'm going to say is this, don't wake up 60 years old and all you have to show for it is your old boat and your house.
Seriously.
Don't do that.
Brokers
you have to, because here's the problem. It's very delicious potentially in a good market because it's a deal. Oh, I made a big deal. I'm a deal. I built a building and it's nice. And then all of a sudden you sell it and you make your big chunk of change. And then and then here's the problem with the developer. Call it a fallacy, not a fallacy, but call it a trap.
Yeah.
Is what happens is you go bigger. You go bigger. You're successful here. You're successful here. You're successful here. Chopped off your head off the bigger you get. Your head gets chopped off. And you got nothing to show for it. And you go back to here's the thing. That's the only thing I'm going to say this to the young bucks out there doing the hard work. Stay in the game, Joe. Stay in the game. I didn't expect that to be funny, Joe. I'm being serious here, Joe.
It's the inflection. I appreciate the enthusiasm. Yes.
Stay in the game. That is the point of this also. Stay in the game. So I'm in the game. And so let me finish this part. I'm sorry. We got 3 hours here, right? So, okay. How many hours we got?
Just waiting.
Is he waiting?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. We started late. Yeah. So here's the one thing also. Part of our model is, you've heard the refi, the business, which I agree. This idea of we don't sell. So we're doing the idea is you want to refi and keep deploying capital moving forward. And then you make sure you don't put too much on the property and too little.
Yeah.
But the point of the loan proceeds is proceeds. That's what allows you to keep doing this.
Not cash in refi.
Right? It's proceeds, right? It's like allows you to keep doing what you're doing. Proceed there, Sal and Joe. Proceed. So that's the point of loan proceeds, because we're not selling. I
don't even know how to smoothly transition out of this one. So
let's do it.
You have, by my count, about 70 buildings in your portfolio.
Oh, my goodness.
Give me your favorite 3 and why they're your favorites.
Okay. Well, I think there's different. And once again, I think we talked about the union painter and office cleaning lady, how they took the next step in Edgewater. Then they took the next step in Uptown. They moved into Uptown, where they and then set up their own office management group. They had 400. So that union. Let me finish that story as we kind of weave that story throughout. That union painter.
Yeah.
And that office cleaner who ended up quitting her job in 1980, 81 after my younger brother got born. So we had 4 boys because Harry Toporek, God bless his soul, said, "Why do you do this?" Why are you spending? Well, you can go out there and rent these apartments that you have vacant over here. 2 or 3 apartments you rent is your salary.
Yeah.
It's because I don't have insurance. I'll figure out the insurance. This. And she quit her job, so she was fully focused on it. Yeah, the union painter fully focused and just fully focused compounding and just hammering it. So
there's a few buildings that made you feel the way that you imagine your parents felt back then.
Well, I'd say how they took the next step. There's a few properties at 4520 North Clarendon, where one of our main office is. That was a huge deal in Uptown. That was in 1996.
Mid-rise building on the lake.
Yeah, beautiful property.
Yeah.
I love. And one thing I love is all this stuff. This stuff you got to be ChatGPT with your neighbor, and that's what makes you Joe Terra business right here. And that's how you get deals done.
I understand that
you
one.
Own
that one
stuff.
doesn't surprise me.
So, anyways, that was a big step.
What else is on?
So, but that's my parents. That's my parents. That was legacy property. So let me just finish with my parents. They had legacy of 400 apartments.
Yeah.
That's what they ended up until my dad had a major stroke. Thank God he's still here to this day, inspiring us with his motivation and energy. And my mom, thank God, very solid. My dad just turned 85.
Incredible.
My mom, 81.
Yeah.
So they had 400 apartments. And then from that 400 apartments, and this is where I never did track and field. Have you ever did track and field? The baton, what's that tag team with the running around? You got to pass the baton.
The relay.
The relay. That's right. How I see what we're doing is a relay. I see my parents started this thing. They built a very strong base foundation. My oldest brother, Muhammad, has been doing it in Indiana and Florida. He likes to do Class A development now, but he still manages. He has a management operation.
Yeah.
Extremely successful.
Yeah.
And then I got my other older brother, Isa, who's basically repositioning Rockford as now we're working on neighborhoods. He's working on the city.
Yeah.
Rockford.
Sure.
He's and then also he's coming downtown here. He bought a big deal here in Gold Coast, and he's looking downtown. So, and then what I'm doing and my younger brother is we took the baton and we're running right now. And the hope is in this, and that's what makes this so hopefully so important. And that's why I do this. My hope is I have a baton to pass. I have a 6-year-old boy and a 3-year-old girl. Hopefully it's a baton I can pass to them the same way my brothers have what they've been able to do so unbelievably. They have a baton to pass, and all of a sudden, what happens is, you're taking the run, and you're running, and you're doing it because it's a lot of purpose in what we're doing. Once again, we're not playing with money. It's not like there's my financial firm where we're selling stocks or something hollow, looking on screens and doing that, or playing with other people's money. We are you cannot find and this is to the young bucks out there, or anyone who wants to get in this, you cannot find a more purposeful job and a career and calling than managing these properties, and hopefully having the incentive to keep managing them and to keep growing and keep taking care of them. So that's where we're in this. I'm in the track. I'm in the running mode right now, and hopefully, I like to think I can sell my kids on the purpose of our work, because kids right now these days, they're less caught up with the money. They want purpose.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Right?
And so you want to be able to say, this is so purposeful. So that's So my properties.
3.
There's 3. Edgewater Gardens in Uptown, Winthrop and Glen Lake. It was one of the biggest deals, biggest steps that we made, because these were properties that were very, very near and dear. I grew up in that corner, Winthrop and Glen Lake. And it was just beautiful courtyard buildings, 100-year-old
middle
courtyard
of the neighborhood,
100-year-old courtyard buildings, just gorgeous. And they also required a lot of work, and that was our first big value, where I got really. Here's the idea: if you take a project that allows you to kind of stretch your muscles when it comes to building a construction team.
Yeah.
I have 8 different contractors now, and they have their own groups of like 7, 8 guys.
Yeah.
Right. So I mean, going across our own portfolio. So this was the first big step, saying we're doing a lot of work here. Well, before that, we bought a few properties, but they didn't require the kind of work. I wasn't doing and the good thing about it is I'm glad I didn't. One thing is, when you're building this, you don't want to lose. You don't want to get too. You like to be able to get some deals that make sense just on operating.
Yeah.
You don't want to have to do too much value add in the beginning.
Balancing the different buckets of the heavy lift versus.
So with Edgewater,
so
we did
I understand that one.
Another big one. I think the portfolio on East Lake was a big deal. right? And that was also another long-term owner-operator that just couldn't manage in the property anymore. Same thing in Edgewater Gardens, another long-term owner-operator, 20, 35, couldn't manage it anymore. They got old, they just got too much. And then the third property I would mention is that duplex deal.
Yeah.
Is our condo deconversion, which is
high rise.
It's a high rise.
Direct view.
And it's just so those three I think stretch you. It's like and they force you. Sometimes you have to push yourself. You got to make yourself uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yeah, those are incredible buildings, man. Well, buildings are portfolios.
Yeah.
We're gonna wrap with the
How much time we got?
No, hang on. First of all,
okay.
You get a chance. This is
okay.
You get a chance for your.
My
we don't
musings?
have much time. I do want to be respectful.
How much time we got? 10 minutes? How many minutes we got? How long we got right now?
It's up to.
How much time? What are we at right now?
Are we over an hour?
He's out there.
Hour 27?
Yeah,
we went out. Oh, yeah? Okay, real quick. Let me just finish this. And then we copy and paste this. Okay, real quick.
So these, for context,
yes.
Sal said, you got to give me some time because I got some stuff to get off my chest. So these are the Sal musings?
Yes, my Sal musings.
Salfucius?
Yeah, Salfucius. Okay, higher rates force higher rents. It's about survival. Yeah. Higher interest rates, okay? Very simple. Need a plan for the big resets. Right? A lot of loans are resetting in the next year. Be ahead. You got to get ahead of that. Maybe you might be good on cash flow today, but imagine if you had that thing doesn't reset by next year. Be very vigilant. Make sure your operations are ready for that.
Yeah.
Right? Make sure your top line is ready for that.
Yeah.
Okay? Great. This is the animal spirits. Great fixed debt allows for some animal spirits. We mentioned that. But sheep spirits can come quick. Sheep spirits can happen. You can start bad.
You've like teased that in deals before.
Yes.
Where like,
it's like, ask me, am I an animal or am I a sheep?
I know, sometimes.
And then I have the kumbaya. It's time to get serious. You cannot kumbaya better housing. Okay? It requires all hands on deck. Okay. Got to have faith. Friedman, the building that you're in right now. I went to one of those Lincoln Park builders, and he was one of the guest speakers, and it stuck with me a little bit. A little older timer, not as old, but old timer in this neighborhood, River North, where your office is.
This building, yeah.
Yes, and one thing he did say is you got to have faith. You got to have faith. There's a George Michael song. Got to have faith.
He transformed the neighborhood. I mean,
you got to have faith.
Yeah.
There's a level of that you just is a part of that mix. Hold on. Remember, especially now, it's a long-term game. Great purpose. This is not Bitcoin. This is not Robinhood. Now it's like this. We heard on LinkedIn, survive to 25. Now it's like survive 25. Okay. This is getting a little philosophical. You can't choose who you're born to, but you can choose who your kids are born to.
Yeah.
Damn,
man.
That's powerful. I make that up. Put that on video. But I need this so you can splice. We need to put these in so we can splice them. You might cut them off. Okay. Okay. I said proceeds. Hold on. Oh, multifamily broker pet peeves. You gonna ask me that?
Let it rip.
Okay. My pet peeves. Don't the monopoly sell. Okay. Oh, you can own a whole neighborhood. Yeah, and I'm gonna pay 13 times gross for that. The stockbroker sell.
The rents are low.
Hey, the stockbroker sell. Oh, you could dollar cost average. I'll go ahead and pay 13 times. I'm gonna dollar cost by 7 times. What? Dollar cost average me. Okay, and then the grandpa sell. In 30 years, what's going to matter? $100 million. The grandpa sell. Okay, next one. You like that? I see. These are worth it. Okay. Okay. Then we got high interest. We said Okay. How about this? Salfucius say, no one will blow more smoke up your ass more than yourself.
Yeah.
And then don't underestimate skin in the game.
Yeah.
Incentives. We talked about how important incentives are. Don't overestimate your contributions and underestimate your blessings. There's the idea of blessings. I mean, at the end of the day, there's there's a level of there is a higher power out there. I believe that we can lean on.
Yeah.
And then we have. I said the value add, value ... Value add, value. And that's it.
My last question.
I'm done.
You've been awesome, but I cannot let you finish up without asking why you love Chicago as a place to be a steward of your family business, grow your family business, raise your kids, live, provide housing. Tell us.
My background, I was, if I wouldn't have been doing this, I'd probably be in journalism, some kind of journalism. So it allows you to kind of look at things objectively. And it's hard for me to find a place that has the kind of intangibles and tangibles, and the kind of capital absorption, the kind of capital and differentiated economy, culture, location, all the natural beauty of everything, which we talked about, and getting beyond the fact that my parents made the decision to be here, and I say thank God they came here instead of New York or California, because this is a place, and this is back to the young bucks out there investing. And I went to Pullman. We MBOA. Shout out to Mike Glasser, MBOA.
Yeah, for sure.
We had a field trip. I felt like I was in high school doing a field trip. We went to go see the Pullman, what they did in Pullman, a lot of that investment. And then we went to see Alderman Beale and Alderman Chico. We went to the quantum physics of what they're planning to do there at what island? What's the name of the quantum? Where the land, where the steel plants were, the old steel plants. And to see aldermen and sell their neighborhood. And there's a lot of these houses that are complete, you can buy for 10, 20 grand.
Yeah.
It's like opportunities, the point is. Opportunities here in Chicago, because things are very poor compared to a lot of these other big cities. Yeah. You can go in there as someone in our business, in real estate.
Yeah. So
many opportunities for us to actually practice our craft and still have the respect. Because one thing is you want to be able to practice your craft in a place that you'd be proud of to practice your craft in. So yeah, I just so many intangibles outside of everything else, right? Outside of the history. I mean, outside of the idea, I think you have kids. You have your 8-year-old and 5-year-old. My hope is with your kids, and same with mine, is that there's something very powerful with this idea of your kids experiencing and giving them the kind of structure, foundation for them to be able to see and enjoy your livelihood, and especially your properties, and to be able to kind of, you're giving them solid podium, solid foundation for them. So yeah, I'm so, back to the union painter and office cleaning lady, I'm so grateful they made a decision to come to Chicago. And it just, I'm carrying the baton, running, what is it, the fourth lap or whatever, the relay.
The city is lucky to have you and your work, and I think the real estate community is lucky to have your energy for the business and your thought leadership and your portfolio and the way you run your business as an example of doing it right. So feel very lucky to have the relationship we have, and kudos for everything you're doing, man.
Thank you, Joe. Yeah. Great show. I think it's not that long. We didn't do that long.
I mean, it was actually packed.
We set a record. We packed it pretty good.
Yeah, it was good, man.
Great.
You're the man.
Give me some. You're
the man.
Joe Show. That's a cut.
We got GGOs.